Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Michael Papinchak Show. I am your host, Michael Papinchak. Today, this is a special episode. I am joined by my friend Dean. We are going to be discussing the book Mastery, The Keys to Success and Long-Term Fulfillment by George Leonard. This is a book that, actually, before we even start, how did you come across this book? Like how this book come into your life?
Sure. Embarrassingly enough, this was a TikTok recommendation, of course. The social media engine of the world right now.
I actually have a book on my bookshelf that I discovered via TikTok.
Of course.
And I started reading it, and it's a book about addiction. It's very interesting.
Absolutely.
Very interesting book. So that is quite interesting. TikTok does have its good points sometimes.
There are certain parts of TikTok that do yield very nice results, like some book clubs.
All right, so George Leonard, just a little background, born in 1923, passed away in 2010 from Mill Valley, California, right outside of San Francisco. He went to the University of North Carolina. He was a pilot in the U.S. Army Air Corps. He also, and he discusses this in this book, Mastery, and has another book on this subject. He was a 5th degree black belt in Aikido, which he states is usually considered the most difficult martial art of all time. And he wrote about education and human potential, which this book obviously deals with. And between 1958 and 2001, he wrote 12 books and became a best-selling author. And The Way of Aikido, I think, was that came after this book.
I think so.
Yeah, and that was, kind of one of his, major publications. And just to give people kind of an overview of the book, I thought I would read the back flap just to kind of give people an understanding, because we're going to be discussing a very specific part of the book, not necessarily going over the whole thing, though that could happen while the conversation evolves. So the back flap says, drawing on Zen philosophy and his experience in the martial art of Aikido, best-selling author George Leonard shows how the process of mastery can help us attain a higher level of excellence and a deeper sense of satisfaction and fulfillment in our daily lives. Whether you're seeking to improve your career or your intimate relationships, increase self-esteem, or create harmony within yourself, this inspiring, prescriptive guide will help you master anything you choose and achieve success in all areas of life. So when you were watching that TikTok video, what about it made you think, I'm going to read that book?
It's so funny because now that you read the kind of the introduction to the book that's on the back, it screams 1991 when the book was released.
Yes.
It sounds like an infomercial.
Yes.
Are you ready to make your life better?
Yes.
So that definitely was not the reason why I got addicted to the book and why I was so gravitated towards it. And it was specifically because of the keys to mastery.
Okay.
So what it was somebody was talking about a very similar event that I went through, which was in January of this year. So in 2022 in January, I went through a phase where I think it was about 2 or 3 weeks where I felt really terrible imposter syndrome. Are you familiar with that? Imposter syndrome, basically, not to give you the textbook definition of it, is the feeling that you do not belong professionally or, kind of in your own state of where you are. So for me, it was exclusively with work. I felt really uneducated, unable to perform my job. I moved to a new job, moved to a new kind of career path within my industry, and I was around some really smart people that were doing some amazing things. And I, of course, being the new guy on the chopping block, I felt like an absolute, new kid.
Okay, all right.
So I was going through some really terrible times trying to deal with anxiety and whatnot, and this book appeared, basically. So this is what life threw at me.
Of course, yeah.
And what I really liked about it, and I wrote, in my notes about this book in preparation to talk about it, were specifically some of the things that why I read it so quickly, and my ingestion of it was within a day.
Sure.
So I think what I liked about it, just kind of set the listener up, was the ticket to mastery isn't exclusive to anybody.
Yes.
That you don't have to be born with being a master at something.
Of course, yeah.
And what's cool about this book and the introduction of it, and not necessarily the part that you read, but the first, kind of part, which is the master's journey. It talks about just, examples of different professional athletes. He used the Seahawks football player Steve Largent, and how he, against all odds. You know, he was somebody that was suffering from sleep deprivation, struggling to try to financially keep his mother and 3 younger brothers afloat while trying to break into the NFL, basically. And it's like Joe Schmo. It's like nobody, right? And he became a master because he spent all of his time after the game on the field just imagining winning and being within that headspace. So it could literally, it's attainable by anybody, which is why I loved that introduction.
Yeah. So the definition right on, it's not page 1, it's page like XI or something, but like the intro to the book. Let me see. So yes, XI. I don't know how I remembered that.
There you go.
It was on page. So the definition of mastery that he gives is the mysterious process during which what is at first difficult becomes progressively easier and more pleasurable through practice. Yeah, and I think that's kind of just so people are on board, kind of with his definition per the first kind of page of content for this book after the acknowledgments. And
what he does, and he talks about the mastery curve, which is not a linear line. What basically that means, if you were kind of thinking in your head about just a graph, right? It's not a straight line that goes from the bottom left corner to the top right. So it's not just a straight line that goes up into the air. It goes up and down. Right? There's ebbs and flows, there's valleys, there's peaks, there's plateaus. And he specifically talks about those plateaus, which is the part of the chapter that I wanted to discuss today, which is what I was at. I was plateaued. And I didn't know what to do with myself. And that's what helped me get through it. And I read this book about maybe a month and a half ago or so, and that's what helped me get through it. And I thought maybe somebody else who's struggling with the same kind of issues would find those successes and this kind of literature to be helpful.
So basically, on this road to mastery that he talks about, the majority of the time you're going to be on these plateaus, these long periods of time where you're really not making progress per se, but you keep practicing, you keep going, and then it'll all kind of build up during that plateau into like a short burst of like progress. So he talks about living on those plateaus, enjoying them, embracing them. And I really enjoyed the dabbler, the obsessive, and the hacker. I'm definitely a dabbler, I think. And maybe with a touch of obsessive. Now, obviously, you could be one in one area, and so I could be a dabbler in this, but obsessive or a hacker in something else.
If we can, I'll give a little bit more context. So what the author does in this book is he talks about 3 types of people and how these variations of people can be used in guidelines kind of below and in the book. And when he says that the categories are obviously not quite this neat. They don't fall
of course
exclusively into one or the other. A dabbler, and he says this is directly from the book, you can be a dabbler in love and a master in art. You can be on a path of mastery on your job and a hacker on the golf course.
Well, I'm definitely a hacker on the golf course. I'll tell you that one. I'm not sure if I mean hack by his definition, but I'm
my only soiree into golf would be Top Golf, so that would be so embarrassing to say that I can even hold.
So just people kind of have a definition here. So basically, a dabbler like approaches new activities with enormous enthusiasm, but quickly loses interest once the plateau hits. Carl Jung called it the eternal kid. George Leonard mentions the obsessive is like the overachiever. Second's not good enough. They're going to double their efforts when they hit the plateau, and they want to get things perfect, like on the first try. Like if during their first golf lesson they're not hitting perfectly, they get upset. And the hacker, he just does enough to get by. Someone who doesn't get like promoted, is just happy with his like the status quo, and just is happy to stay on the plateau and not make any progress at all.
And
so
I like the hacker, the definition of the hacker, because at the very, very end, what he does is he says in relationships, which is it sometimes when professionally you're stuck, sometimes it kind of bleeds into your personal life, especially your relationships. And what ends up happening is, he says, in relationships at times it feels like the lulls that switch you mentally from lovers, so boyfriend, girlfriend, partner, whatever, into roommates. And this is kind of like my definition of, this is what I extracted from it. So if you're stuck, if you're a hacker, you're just living to get by.
Yes.
You're at work, you're showing up on time, you're
Yep.
leaving when you're supposed to.
You're taking all the breaks that you're supposed to.
Yeah.
There's no going in on your day off kind of thing.
It's like what I
Yeah.
described and what my wife always says, it's like passing ships in the night.
Yes.
You're literally just there as an arrangement. In this way, he says it's an arrangement in which both partners have clearly defined and unchanging roles. And that's why I'm like, when I read that, it immediately struck me because I was stuck. And again, this is earlier in the year when it's winter. I work from home. So does
Yeah.
my wife. Like, we literally are on top of each other the whole time.
Yeah.
And unless you have somebody telling you this is what's wrong with you, this is where you're at,
Mhm.
you know, it resonates really well.
Yeah, and this is right at the beginning of the book, and I feel it's there so as you're reading the book and maybe trying to figure out, okay, how do I start to master something, I think he wants you to have an idea of maybe which three of these you are.
Yeah. Or how you see yourself.
Exactly. So, because I think he does say if you're a dabbler or a hacker or whatever, I forget which one, he says you're going to have to change yourself.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to master something and you're a dabbler, you know that after your first few lessons or something, and after that, that excitement of your first golf, let's just use golf again,
Sure,
golf
absolutely.
lesson, or your first round, here's an example. I'm a shotgun shooter, right?
Mhm.
I shoot skeet and I shoot trap, and 5-stand and sporting clays.
It's all Greek to me, so I
Yeah,
apologize.
so
but I understand what you're talking about.
They're called shotgun. They're like shotgun sports. So the first time I ever shot skeet, I shot a 16, which is incredible.
Oh,
Usually
wow.
people don't hit any, or they might hit one or two just because they just.
How many do you get per round then, if you don't?
I'm a 25.
Okay, so that's pretty good.
So the guy was like, "Listen, dude, you're a natural at this. Forget golf. You better come down and shoot." So I decided to go buy my own shotgun, and
You went all out.
I went all out, just like a dabbler would. And when I went to go shoot again, I only shot 9. Now I could have easily been like, well, that 16 was just a fluke. But I became obsessed with
Reproducing that.
with getting back there. And I shot 9s for weeks, and the next thing you know, I'm shooting 12s, and then 13s, and then 16s again, and then I'm shooting 25 straight. I won 3 championships.
Oh wow! Oh, so okay,
in
so
a row.
You took
so
it
I
the whole
took
way.
that road of mastery. Now, I don't do it as much anymore because I think what happened was I had an idea of where I wanted to go with it. So the first thing was getting 25 straight. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
And I'm
25 to 25. Right?
Yeah, that's a big. Now, when you compete, you actually shoot 100 birds in a row, but that's a whole different. This is just club shooting. This is social shooting.
Yeah, this is practice.
This is practice. Like literally. I mean, if I would go to my club to practice if I was doing professional or more organized actual shooting events. And but I had a goal of getting that 25 straight in each game, and then I won those championships kind of in spite of myself. I didn't really well, I obviously tried. I didn't just
show up for show up.
I mean, but I didn't really go thinking I'd win. Actually, the first one that I won, I did my rounds and I left. Because I'm like a new shooter. These guys are in their 50s and 60s. They've been shooting their whole lives.
Yeah.
I get a phone call. They're like, "Hey, Mike, can you come back? You're going to win." I said, "Yeah, I'll come back." Because I had to take a picture and get a trophy, Then I won 2 more years in a row, and then I moved to New York. But I feel I can be a dabbler in other things. And but that I somehow really latched onto it and really focused on it. And really in the plateaus, like the guy my instructor, we still joke about me getting 16s or 18s for weeks, and I wouldn't miss the same birds all the time. You know what I mean? It wasn't always like.
Is it? Do you stand in the same stance and they
No,
just get? Or do you
so
move?
in skeet you move around,
Okay.
and the birds stay the same.
Got it.
So
it's challenging as far as where your stance is,
Yes.
not how high it goes or what direction.
It's all about where you are and how you understand the game and the angles and the geometry and all of that.
That's cool. So
yeah.
it's primarily focuses on tracking then.
Yes.
Because as soon as it comes out, you're predicting.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
What I liked about is that you were talking about how you obsessively continue to try to get to 20. You said 25.
25
right?
is one round of skeet. One round of trap is 25 birds.
Right. So basically, your goal was to get 25 out of 25 each time, as if it was effortless, right?
Yes.
And what I like about the obsessive is, as the author said, is that in relationships, the person lives for the upward surges, the swelling background music, the trip to the stars. And I loved those kind of analogies to make you understand it's all about that beautiful kind of over romanticized, like, quick achievements that are obsessed over for no reason.
Yeah.
And what I loved about that is you had an example that was, like, perfect.
Yes.
You know?
And this was for me. Like, I'm not married, but it's not like me getting 25 straight led to meeting my wife or meant to, like, winning over some maiden at some competition. You know what I mean? It's not a Robin Hood kind of thing. This was just something that I was like, wow, I really love golf, and I have a place, but I'm not very good at it.
Sure.
And I've tried to be good at it. And I go to this thing I've never done before, and I was instantly good. And now that is part of these personalities.
Absolutely.
Being
he
instantly
talks
good.
about being able to recognize yourself, and again, understanding why you're on a plateau.
Yes. So it became something that was like, it almost became my identity for a bit. I felt like I might have been doing it too much. But again, I latched onto this path of mastery in it. And now, but I obviously, if I was still on that path, I mean, to become a national American ski champion or something, that wasn't really money. Yeah. That wasn't a path that I needed to be on.
It wasn't a pie in the sky goal.
I mean, that would have been like
nice, but not.
I would have had to literally dedicate my life to shooting ski.
No other hobbies.
And literally travel around Pennsylvania, because that's what you have to do.
Okay.
Like, they're called registered birds.
Oh, wow.
And,
okay,
and
so
you become a member of, like, the Pennsylvania Skeet Association or whatever. And then you have to register and, like, pay. And then you go to these different shooting clubs and you shoot registered birds, and your scores are marked down. And there's, like, A is the best, B, C, D. And then when you go to the state competition, if you're a D, then you obviously compete. You're not going to compete with A's. The goal is to become an A. And then from there,
Here's the funny thing that happens from an outsider's perspective, right? And you're talking about all these hyper specific like this is exclusive to this interest, this hobby, this sport, right?
Yeah.
Because there are trophies, there are advertised sponsors, there are televised events, etc. So what I find fascinating is mentally you took it all the way to the end. You dreamed about potentially competing.
Yes,
right?
and I did do it, and I did shoot registered birds, but it didn't become. There were just other things in my life, like my singing career, moving to New York, my family, that it couldn't be.
It couldn't be the only thing at the moment, and I get that. A lot of times in life, it's understanding that maybe it's not right now.
Yes,
and that's cool, but a lot of times, because of societal pressures, internal pressures, work pressures, whatever, you're swayed one way or another. And that's really cool, is because the very first thing in the chapter that I wanted to focus on today were the tools of mastery. And he talks about be aware of the homeostasis works and how it works.
Yes.
The way it works and why you get there. And again, it's kind of similar to the plateau, but what I loved about, again, this is number 1 of 5 of the guidelines of mastery. So this is part 3 of the book. So this is the almost final part before his parting wisdom pieces, where he talks about the most important and discipline of the guideline of all is to understand the resistance and backlash. Yeah. And whether those are internal or external. So you were talking about your life. As an example where you moved to New York, your singing career. I know that you had some, some of your family members have passed. Yes. And I know that life throws a lot of curveballs. Yeah. So I get it.
When I went to New York City, I basically had to choose a path where shooting was no longer in my life. I mean, there's no skeet fields in Central Park. Hey, so Kona is part of the show, and she is very excited to see Dean. So
yes, so if you hear scratching in the background.
slightly distracted. So by moving to New York, now that is a different path of mastery, where my life really became ultra focused, because there weren't a lot of hobbies in New York City for me.
Aside from like the arts, really?
Yeah, I mean, it was just literally my master's degree, singing. Now, the podcast, what we're doing now, started in Manhattan, and it did become kind of a hobby, something fun for me to do. But, that was a different thing for me, where I kind of had to, okay, all these other things that I've been doing, hobbies or whatnot, are kind of paused because I've decided now to dedicate myself to becoming a professional opera singer.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. I know you have a great voice because I've seen some of your videos that you post on social media, whether it's you in front of the piano just playing something that you love to sing.
Yeah.
I know it's like just cut and dry. It's just straightforward, one camera, no microphone. I love it. Still love it.
Well, no, because like I have an actual, I mean, if I had like I do have an electric piano. It's in storage.
Sure. Because
I have my real piano. My family's like real piano. And for me to have recording equipment around it, it's in my living room. It would be like a whole thing.
Kind of invasive.
Yeah. But if I had my electric piano, if I had room in here, I could hook it up to all this equipment if I wanted to.
Yeah. So in the way the homeostasis works and how how this book is laid out is obviously it talks about, going into something and realizing that it may not be right for you. And what I liked is he said, don't panic. And I'm quoting from the book here. Don't panic and give up the first sign of trouble. What he says is you might also expect resistance from family, friends, and coworkers. Say you used to struggle to get out of bed at 7:30 in the morning and barely drag yourself to work. And again, I'm reading from the book here. Now that you are on a path of mastery, so you picked something and you're devoting yourself to it. You're up at 6 a.m. for a 3-mile run and in the office, charged and ready to go before 8:30. You might figure your coworkers would be overjoyed, but don't be too sure. And when you get home, still raring to go, do you think that your family will be welcome to that? And it's like, it's this strange, and again, this book was written in 1991, so it's 31 years old, and it's still resonating with somebody that has social media, because it didn't exist in 91, no internet. I mean, maybe I think it came around 93, 94, maybe.
Yeah. So, no internet like we have it now, where it's literally in it,
And it's totally typical, I think, in the early 90s for this still to be, one person that's bringing in the money,
sure,
and somebody that stays at home. And typically speaking, in the early 90s in America, that's very much the male of the family, if you will, in a kind of male-female marriage. But that being said, it's totally typical at one point in time, and still is at times, for them to be only one person that brings in the money.
Sure.
So you come in all charged and ready to go, and then you have a completely different dynamic when you get home. So that resistance, learning to live with it, but learning to work around it, and that's why he gives you these keys. The second key to mastery, which I loved, was the be willing to negotiate with resistance. And what I loved the most about it is simply turning off your awareness to the warnings deprive you of guidance and risk damaging the system. So if you encounter resistance, whether it's at work, you want to try this new thing, or at home, at home I wanted to start learning electrical. So in my own personal life, how you were talking about, with shotgun sports, you invested time, money, energy, you researched, you kind of went the whole way. I did the same thing with how to wire certain electrical appliances in my house.
Okay, yeah.
I didn't want to pay to have, where it sprung from was I knew my wife wanted to get a new washer and dryer. We didn't have the correct ampage, 30 amp breaker, or 30 amp receptacle on the wall. So I installed it myself. And that requires me taking off the panel and working with live wires. We have 200 amp service in our house. This is something that you'd pay several $100s just to get an electrician in the door, not including parts. I mean, a 50-foot run of 10 gauge wire costs about $150.
Wow. Okay.
That's just for the wire. So, anyways, I'm going.
No. That's really interesting, because that's really far from anything I would try to do. Yeah. Because I'm just such a, I don't know, right brain, left brain. I'm more of an artistic mind, and so working with wires and things, like unlike my younger brother, who would who would
foam at the mouth.
That's his, forte, mechanical engineering. Right now, he's been taking apart and cleaning and basically taking old mechanical watches that don't work,
nice,
and making them work.
That's awesome.
Which is, to me, mind blowing.
Yeah,
like I would take it right to the jewelry store. Like, let someone else handle that.
My sausage fingers would never be able to handle it.
No,
absolutely,
no way.
So that kind of be willing to negotiate with resistance and understanding that resistance is very much part of the journey to mastery.
Sure.
Where it could be both internal.
Yes.
Meaning that you're saying I'm not good enough.
Yes.
Which is where I was at. So when I talked about earlier in January, this is where I was at. I wasn't willing to negotiate with myself. I just had these, if you will, the angel and devil analogy on your shoulders. The devil was speaking a lot louder than the angel, and I just kept self-sabotaging myself because I wasn't willing to negotiate. Which is, okay, you don't know this part about your job. Just start smaller. Learn about the first concept that you don't understand, and then that will lead to the next. And I gave up on myself, which is why it was so difficult to crawl out of it. Because when you're talking yourself every day about how terrible you are at your job, and you feel like you're not going anywhere, you just kind of spiral out of there.
Okay.
And then the third key is develop a support system. Now, what I love is that the first sentence he says when he introduces this key, it says, "You can do it alone, but it helps to have great people around you with whom you can obviously share the joys and the perils of these trials and tribulations on your way to mastery." And again, he's using the author in the book. He uses tennis, I think. About the swing, the backhand, and he also used that example of the Seahawks NFL player. Yeah, and again, it's just that anybody could be a master at something. You just have to start. And you have to realize that there is an entire ecosystem that happens around the process to getting there. Yeah. So developing a support system of people that understand that how you have communicated ahead of time, this is where I want to be. Yeah. This is important for me. I'm going to dedicate time to this. And finding that support system is what makes, it.
And that could be difficult. I mean, again, I'm single. You have a wife. It could be, you might have a wife and 3 kids, and all of a sudden you want to master something that could, maybe take away from making money. Maybe could, and it's like to have your wife and for me, it would be friends, family, understanding where you're coming from, why you want to do these things. Mm-hmm. And it's like, if I say, I can't go out tonight for a beer because I need to lose weight and I have to go to the gym. I want to have 6-pack abs, whatever it is. Sure. And it's like, well, you're not a friend anymore. And it's like, well, I'm sorry, but beer hasn't helped me. You know what I mean? Yeah. This is something that is going to help me, and I'm, it just is what it is.
And what's nice is that in the developing the support system, he specifically talks about what if your quest for mastery is a lonely one. Meaning, what if you can find no fellow voyagers? And again, I'm reading from the book. What if you could find no fellow voyagers on this particular path? At the least, you can let people know that are close to you what you're doing and ask for their support. Yeah. You don't necessarily need people to go to the lengths of maybe driving you to practice or financially supporting you. Just saying, this is what I'm doing. All I need you to do is be aware. Yeah. So if you see me frowning, or if you see me sad, it's because I have a plan in place. I have a destination, I have a journey ahead of me. I'm looking for your support. So just so you know that I'm doing this, and that's why it's important. Yeah. And then the fourth key is follow a regular practice. Yes. And this goes with almost anything. And I wish I remember the statistic, but I think it's like it takes like 20 some days to develop a new habit.
Yeah, I think it's like 21. Something like if you do something 21 days in a row, it becomes now a habit. And, yes, I think that's the.
And people obviously are embarking on many types of different changes, whether it's personal, professional. You could just want to be a great dog handler, right? Sure. And some of the examples that I kind of talked about is dog training curve, and this is more for me. I became a first-time dog owner 3.5 years ago or so. Okay. And I hyper fixated on having the perfect dog. So I studied every single possible command and how you get there.
Yeah.
And everybody around me knew in my life, bless you, Kono. Everybody in my life knew that my dog Biscoff was going to be the perfect dog.
Yeah.
I was outside with a 6-foot lead, like training recall and treats and paw and sit and bar, everything.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually I abandoned it because I realized that what I'm asking of my dog will never be picture perfect.
Yeah.
But all of those skills that he learned over the course of me having him for 2.5 years, 3 years, eventually that's when I stopped. That's how I knew that, okay, he mastered those skills. I can move on to other things. And it wasn't just like the show dog kind of, leaps through the air and grabs this thing in the middle of it. None of that.
Yeah. I actually belong to an indoor dog park.
I know. And we talked about this previously. And it's so fun.
And they have the like obstacle stuff and like the tunnel. And some dogs love it. Kona has no interest whatsoever in leaping over things or going through tunnels. She just wants to play and chase the ball. She's a street dog from Puerto Rico. She has very simple. She's like, all I need is a ball and just to chase it, You're
just a happy girl.
Yeah. And it's just so interesting, though, because, well, first off, if I had her as a puppy and we started doing those things, I'm sure she might be interested. But now she's 4 years old. She's, she is who she is.
The fifth part. So the fourth part being regular practice, the fifth key to mastery is dedicate yourself to lifelong learning. And this is a bit more of the fluffy part, like you read at the back of the book, where it's like really the 90s kind of like quintessential, and which is a little bit more of, practice is a habit. And obviously the idea behind practices is not just providing a basis of an underlying homeostasis where you have a place or something to go to where you know that you can practice. And I'm using air quotes because practice is also the part of the mastery. Similar to how you're talking about skeet shooting, you would have to drive and go to competition. That time in the car driving or getting to the I want to say arena, if you will, or whatever the outdoor area that you're performing in, if you will. That whole part of feeling the grass and understanding, okay, this is where I'm going to stand, and that's all part of mastery. So although it's not necessarily practice, but dedicating yourself and understanding that the fifth key is it's lifelong learning. So even though it's the lulls and it's plateaus, I have to drive to I don't know, State Park, or I have to drive to Erie or whatever, that's part of that journey. And that's why I appreciate it, because he says that the dabbler, the obsessive, and the hacker are all learners in their own fashion. And again, I'm reading from the book, but lifelong learning is the special journey of those who travel the path of mastery, the path that never ends. And what I loved the most after he did that was in kind of like the closing thoughts of the book. And that's what I loved about this last chapter, is he says the path of mastery learning never ends. And he uses a Japanese swordsman, which I loved, and I'm going to butcher it, but I tried to get the pronunciation. It's Yamaoka Tesu. I believe that's how it's pronounced. And again, this is in 1800s from modern day now is modern day Tokyo. His quote is, "Do not think that this is all there is. More and more wonderful teachings exist. The sword is unfathomable." So again, this is kind of take what you will from it, kind of like the proverbs that never stop giving, if you will. If you read it in certain times of your life, it will have more profound meaning than it does now, maybe. But what I loved about it is it does speak about mastery. Don't just because you're holding the sword and you can do these maneuvers that these famous Japanese swords handlers would be able to execute, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's it. You have to commit to lifelong learning and mastering every move, every breath, every stance, and the list goes on.
Yeah. So, I mean, when it comes to, first off, and that's anything, like opera singers, you never stop having a teacher. Even if you become a teacher yourself, let's say I get a job at Carnegie Mellon, I'm teaching voice.
Okay.
I would still have a teacher for myself, because most people still perform. Like my teacher in college, she would perform certain things. You know, if they did like a big requiem or something, she might be the mezzo-soprano soloist, or she might say, you know, I'm going to take a week off to go perform in Minneapolis or something. And she wrote a sacred song book, you know, that she spent time publishing and stuff and putting together. And so you never really stop as an opera singer. And it's not always one teacher too. You want to go to as many as you can to kind of grab nuggets of wisdom. But you usually should have, like he says in the beginning of the book,
you should have I think he said something along the lines of having somebody that you look up to.
Yes.
And kind of almost interviewing
Yeah.
who you want to be taught by.
Yeah. So when I went to New York City, the teacher that I had during my master's, there came a point where my voice was changing, and I needed to switch teachers. But he became my mentor. And even though I switched teachers, I would always go back to him and sing for him, because I felt he knew my instrument better than like anyone. And we've been discussing the tools for mastery,
Mm-hmm.
but before that he talks about the 5 master keys, and instruction is number 1. And that's basically finding your master teacher. Finding, for him, it would be a black belt Aikido instructor. You know, for me, it was going to New York and finding that voice teacher, because at the end of the day, singing is a job. Okay, it's a job, just like your job, just like my sister's job, just like, you know, if someone pays me, I show up and I do a job. Yes, it's singing on stage, it's acting, there's costumes and wigs. But someone it's not only about learning how to sing,
Mm-hmm.
it's about learning how to do the job. And when this teacher told me that, I knew this was someone who understood what it took to become a professional opera singer. Not just a good singer, not just someone who sings at parties and, you know, does karaoke and people go, wow, listen, but someone who is a professional.
Sure.
And that I thought was very important.
And it's cool because we'll use the opera as an example, and I apologize if I'm butchering this and it's incorrect. So please, you obviously are a little bit more of an expert than I am. But back when I was much younger, singing was something that I considered because I was playing music with a band that I could possibly play and sing at the same time. I don't think about that anymore, but because of the type of music that I play. But that being said, I talked about with the singer in my old band about how he uses the cavities behind his eye sockets.
Oh.
And I'm sure that's something that you can talk about, because to me, that makes absolutely no sense.
Yes.
But I can imagine that an instructor. Now, what I love about this is that in the book on page 7, it talks about, you know, it starts with baby steps. The teacher shows you how to hold the rack and uses tennis as an example.
Yes.
So a teacher may be a video, right? And you say, okay, I'm going to take a baby step. I'm going to learn the difference between head voice and to work from my diaphragm versus my whatever.
So what just real quick, what you were describing there is what they call singing into the mask.
Okay.
So the sound of your voice, regardless of what you sing, isn't created here. And I'm pointing to my larynx, okay? If you should put a microphone directly above the larynx and sing, all you're going to hear is a buzzing sound. The reason why my voice might be loud, someone else is, if I have a huge head, there's all this sinus cavity space where the sound is actually created. That this is a resonator, and I'm pointing to above your lip. Okay,
it's like directly behind your eye sockets.
Yes, up into your head. When you sing opera, you sing back and up, not out. Most people think I'm like yelling outwards. I'm actually singing back and shooting my voice up into this cavity where the sound is actually created.
Is that why I feel like opera singers, when they're on the stage, have a much more they never move? Their feet are so firmly planted because they're projecting upwards toward the ceiling.
Yeah, your feet need to be, you are your instrument, and you must be anchored. So there's this concept of support, right? It's this vague kind of, we'll just support more. Well, what does that mean? There's this whole discussion.
How do I support?
What does that even mean, right? Now we can go a long. I got like an hour about support.
We could spend all night talking about head voice and opera singers.
But at the end of the day, you are your instrument. Your instrument must be grounded, and your instrument must be aligned.
Yeah.
You know, if I should bend a violin in half, it's not going to sound like a violin anymore.
Yeah.
It's going to be broken. And basically, because even though your larynx is a resilient thing, it is this little thing floating in your throat, and if you're singing at a top level like opera and you're not supporting correctly, you can break it.
Yeah.
And rock and like Adele, Sam Smith, they become these huge pop stars. No one really actually taught them how to sing properly. They have these natural voices, and they end up getting a surgery. But their demand on their voices, because they're pop stars, is huge.
But I think it's tough because some of these pop stars are also spending months in the studio perfecting a track.
Yeah.
They're obviously singing organically. It's their voice, but a 2-second snippet into, let's say, a second chorus might have taken them 3 weeks just to get those breaths right.
Yeah.
And so that it's not cut and paste from other sessions.
Yeah.
Some people hyper fixate on perfecting it like that. And what I loved about the example of the opera and you moving to New York is you remember that and you might know what I'm talking about. There was a famous video of I think a first chair violinist playing in the subway of New York, and it's like, you know, cheapest tickets to his
Joshua Bell.
Is that okay? So
yeah, so Joshua Bell is a hugely famous violinist.
Okay, so you do know who I'm talking about.
He was just playing. That'd be like Pavarotti just in the subway singing,
right?
And you're just throwing pennies into his hat, and you're like, wow, there's Luciano Pavarotti.
And the funny part is that sure, there may be people who have absolutely no idea who this person is, whether it is an opera singer or a first chair cellist, whatever it may be.
There's going to be a lot of people who would walk by Joshua Bell and have no idea who he is.
Who's this bum?
Now I'm not even a violinist, but when you're in that world, when you're in that level in New York City, at a high level of musical training and stuff, these things are just in your orbit. You know, they're in my orbit.
Yeah.
I know who he is. I see him on not billboards, but like when you go down to Lincoln Center and there's the New York Symphony, they might have like a banner of him, like see Joshua Bell in some violin concerto or something. You're just aware of it. Plus, all your friends. Like my main friend group when I was in my master's was a classical guitarist, a viola player, a piano player, and then me, an opera singer. My core group was 4 dudes who did 4 different things. So I was always exposed to different stuff. I just wasn't hanging out with other opera singers.
Right.
Because guess what we talk about all the time? Opera.
Right.
But when I was with my, like, we called ourselves the Wolf Pack. Okay, well, you know. I know.
It's corny, but it's great.
Yeah, right.
It's great.
When we were together, we might bring up, I had this classical guitar thing to do, I had a viola thing to do, but at the end of the day, we all have 4 different interests, and it was just a nice group to have. Because when I was with opera singers, that's all we talked about. And but we are passionate, though, but sometimes you want to just talk about, can we talk about something else?
Yeah.
Like, you know.
The example of the violinist or the what was that player's name?
Joshua Bell.
Joshua Bell. So this video of Joshua Bell, or this still image of him playing in the subway, it's not necessarily about him, let's say, downgrading his abilities, if you will. It's not necessarily him saying, look, I don't really feel like playing in the symphony hall, if you will, tonight. What he's doing is he's perfecting, if you will, his practice so that he can try to play in an environment that's different, louder, maybe with lower ceilings. Maybe he has to hold his reed differently or his bow differently. Excuse me. All of those things take so long to master because he could walk into that subway station and know within 30 seconds, I can't play like I do in the symphony hall, and I have to make the following adjustments. And just like it would be with you taking a drive 4 hours away to another place to play, skeet shooting. Like things were different than where you normally practice, but you practice so that you instantly know. It's like sous chefs, right? They spend countless of hours sweating in the kitchen so that blade goes through the food perfectly, and they can, if you will, anticipate their head chef's move.
Yes.
So, those garnishes can go on in perfect synchrony.
Yeah, that is interesting because, I shoot primarily at one skeet field, at one shooting place. And what happens is your muscle memory. You know those machines. You know the angle, you know how fast. Now, in competition, everything has a standard. The machines are at this angle, the speed of the bird is this. Mm-hmm. But, when you go to these clubs, you don't, there's no like Pittsburgh Skeet Shooting Association like official coming to check the speed of the birds.
Of course.
So, I might go to another club and shoot terribly because I'm shooting at my club. In my mind, in my muscle memory, I'm like shooting my skeet field. So that is a very interesting thing, is that even though you have all this muscle memory, all this mastery of maybe one skeet field, mm-hmm. when you go to another, you have to have this awareness that, okay, I need to surrender, as he says, to this environment, and know that, I might have to be a little more hyper aware of where these birds and their speed, and maybe I won't shoot as quickly or as accurately on the first round, but as rounds go by, I adapt.
You're quicker to make the adjustments,
yes,
because you've mastered the skills,
yes,
of knowing and the feel. It's the same thing for dog training, for example.
Yeah.
If you take Kona out on a walk randomly, and she really doesn't like small dogs,
mm-hmm.
Or let's say you're working on recall, you got to break those things into smaller pieces,
mm-hmm.
so she masters them and you master them, so
yes.
you can make adjustments on the fly. And I'll give you an example. If you go to the dog park, like that indoor dog park, and you want to work on recall, you work on recall with a lead outside tied to a tree, and you make her work for it by giving her chicken or bacon, or something that she absolutely cannot go without. And over time, you take that resistance away. So you work for longer distances, and that's
mm-hmm.
and it's those micro adjustments.
Yeah.
As we talk about opera singing or playing in a subway.
Oh yeah, and then when you go to different opera houses, they're all built differently. So at the Metropolitan Opera, apparently there's a sweet spot. Apparently there's somewhere on stage. Now I've never had the pleasure of singing on that stage, but I've been there, mm-hmm. but I've never actually sung on the Metropolitan Opera stage. But apparently there is a spot that, like, it somehow, for some reason, is the perfect acoustic spot.
Interesting. And it's only on stage where the residents or something?
It's something to do with, if you sing on that spot, it hits the hall a certain way and amplifies your voice. And there's this story, and again, these are stories.
Sure.
Pavarotti's in an opera. He's the most famous opera singer ever, in the world. And obviously, you could do La Boheme 1,000 times, or 1,000 different productions, and you have 1,000 different directors that give you 1,000 different blockings, costumes and stuff. So this director said, okay, when you're singing that note, I want you to stand here. And he goes, no, I'm going to stand here. Because that was the spot.
Yes.
Because when I sing this high note that I'm famous for, I will be standing in that spot. And there's just, you can try all you want to move me, but I'm about 500 pounds. So you know what I mean. But like, that's just a little anecdote there. But that's a very interesting kind of thing.
But what's funny is that, so say you were in New York, right? Let's say this is 15 years ago.
Yeah.
However long ago this was. It doesn't matter. The point is, let's say you said, I want to know where this sweet spot is.
Yeah.
So then what you do is you open up the equivalent of the penny saver, whatever it would be, and you look for all the classes that are held on that stage.
Yeah.
And you sign up for every single one that you can afford to pay for or can make work with your schedule, so that your only result is you get up on that stage and you find that sweet spot.
Yes.
It may be music that you never sing. It's not your preference.
Yep, but it doesn't. Yeah.
But it gives you the opportunity to feel the floor creak.
Yeah.
And to know, okay, I'm 17 steps to the right. It's about right here. I need to stand underneath these overhead scaffolding or whatever the catwalk. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the process to mastery. Is willing to necessarily not degrade yourself, but put yourself maybe a couple pegs lower to do maybe something that you don't want to sing or a class you don't want to take, just so you can walk on the stage and get quicker to what you need to be.
Well, let me tell you, one of these things, I think the thing when he talks about surrender is very interesting. Because there are people with big egos and just think, well, I'm some big A personality something, and I'm going to do it my way, even though the instructor says hold the racket this way. I think even though every tennis player in the world, Nadal, Federer holds the racket this certain way, I know better. So I'll never forget, and this isn't really pertaining to like knowing better, but the first time that I ever sang on a big stage, like a legitimate opera house, I felt like I was like screaming because I looked out because it was a rehearsal. There's no one really out there. The lights, you can see the whole hall.
Sure. Everything's lit up.
It's huge. And I thought I need to literally yell.
Overexert yourself, basically.
Yeah. Because like how the heck is anyone going to hear me? But what you have to do is the hall is built in a certain way. You're on the stage a certain way. The orchestra's, opera's not new. They figured this out centuries ago, right? You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Well, going back to Roman times and even before, they built them that way.
Yeah. And I got off stage, and my buddy who I was singing with was like, "Dude, you're like really pushing." And I'm like, "I've never sung on a stage like this." And you just have to sing like you would in the practice room, like you would during all your rehearsals. You just sing and surrender to the environment. Just do what you do. You've been on this path of mastery. That's a micro mastery where you've learned this opera with like this blocking, on this stage, right?
Yeah.
You got to master all of this stuff within this couple weeks or few months or like whatever. And don't change it just because now instead of being in the rehearsal hall, we're on the stage.
Yeah.
Because the opera house will, first off, opera singers, right? We're not amplified. Our voices carry over, right? But we're built to do that. We train to do that. But the first time, man, I was yelling because I thought there's no way they're going to be able to hear me.
Did you get off the stage and were like lightheaded or something?
Yeah, I was like, that's not tenable. Like I can't. So that's the difference between knowing how to sing and knowing how to do the job.
Mm-hmm. And what's cool is that when he talks about the dabbler, the obsessive, and the hacker, in The Hacker, he talks about the professional who is known for only a solid forehand, but ragged backhand, and is okay, and I'm using air quotes, with using this as leverage to continue. So if you said, well, I'm on the stage now, so I'm just going to yell because, this is what I've done, so whatever. Yeah. And just thinking that will carry you and it will be acceptable, and
it's not, because they're not going to hire you back.
No,
because you sound like shit.
And that's why, and this goes hand in hand with getting resistance and learning about homeostasis and kind of equilibrium of things, and learning that if you're not going to hit it out of the park the first time. But
100%.
Trying
100%. Yeah, and luckily, obviously, you're on the stage before your opening night. It's not like opening night's the first time you're on that stage. I mean, you spend at least, I don't know, a week or maybe a couple dress rehearsals in the space doing it for real. Because usually you're like in a rehearsal hall. So like when I was with the Pittsburgh Opera, all of our rehearsals are at the Pittsburgh Opera offices, and they're big like rehearsal spaces. Mm-hmm. And then a couple dress rehearsals on the actual Benedum stage, and then you do opening night, because you got to go on the stage, you gotta, but
whether you like it or not, you're going on the stage.
You gotta go on the stage. And luckily by then I had already had my experience at the San Francisco Opera yelling my head off and knew all I had to do was just sing it like I always sing, and they're gonna hear me, and it's hard. Okay, it's like in shooting. Okay, in shotgun shooting, you don't aim. Okay, if you aim at the bird, the orange disc, you're going to miss.
Yeah, because you're not accounting for the wind and the trajectory.
So you have to lead the bird. So this is what changed my whole shooting game.
Okay.
It's not about shooting the bird. It's now okay. I'm saying bird. I just want everyone to know they're clay. They're clay pigeons. They're clay discs. We call them birds.
Yeah.
Because back in the day, they were actual birds.
Of course.
You know.
Are we talking about duck hunt?
No.
This is duck hunt.
No. Yeah. So these, we call them birds, but they're the orange discs, right? It's not about hitting the disc. It's not about shooting it. It's about placing the 300 BBs that are in your 12 gauge shotgun shell in the sky
in front of it,
so the bird flies into it.
Oh, okay. That's such a it's beautiful.
It's a concept
Yeah.
that changes how you proceed. I'm not trying to shoot the bird. I'm trying to like spraying a hose across a barn wall.
Okay. Spraying
my BBs in the air so the bird flies into it.
I have a really silly question. As you're tracking, right?
Yeah.
And I'm kind of for the listener, I'm pretending I have a shotgun.
Sure, yeah.
So are you tracking, and as you're pulling the trigger, you're still moving?
Yes. You
never stop.
You never stop the gun.
You're not basically your stance is not locked.
No.
And you're pulling the trigger.
No.
Okay.
What you actually do is you face away from the house that the bird's coming out.
Mm-hmm.
You coil your body back, so when you call pull, and your body uncoils and the gun never stops.
It's almost like a slow golf swing because you're just tracking.
Yes.
But basically your hips, I guess your torso is moving and your hips are kind of adjusting.
My legs stay planted.
Right.
And I coil my body back towards the house. I call pull, and then uncoil it, and then just keep my hips, just like a golf swing. Keep your hips moving, keep your body moving, pull the trigger when you're ready, and never stop the gun. Yeah.
It's so interesting because I didn't grow up necessarily in a very sports heavy family because we moved a lot when I was younger, and I never was really in one place for a very long time or young enough to be in a sports team. So that was never really a big upbringing of mine. More so the arts and music. I woke up every morning with opera playing in the background as loud as possible.
That's great.
Sometimes show tunes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, most singers start in musical theater because really, even though you see these like Jackie Evanchos and Charlotte Churches, these young girls who have these opera voices, that's fine. But at the end of the day, if I had a 12-year-old girl that I was training, we would be, first off, I would assess her voice, obviously. We wouldn't necessarily be singing opera, maybe some classical songs like O Sole Mio, very famous song. That's a Neapolitan song. That's not from an opera. It's not an aria, right? So there are these songs, these old songs written, I'm in Italy, that are like, it's a way every opera singer sings those as a way to get into this kind of idea of how opera works, how classical Italian music works. And then you eventually graduate into the big boy stuff, into the actual arias, into the big opera stuff. But I started in a musical theater. There's a Castle on a Cloud and I don't know, you name it, all this. And I did musicals and stuff. And then as I grew up, as I got older, the voice obviously moved into a more operatic sound. People say, Mike, why do you do opera? Why don't you just do musical theater? Because I can.
Right.
And there's musical theater people who can't. Like there's this, speaking of a TikTok, right? There's this young woman on TikTok who has a beautiful voice, kind of like a rock and roll belty voice. She posted a video trying to sing opera, and it was horrible. I'm sorry. I sent it to my sister Danielle because she has, actually, if you ask me who has the best voice in my family, I would say I'm Danielle.
Ooh,
she has
a little internal competition there.
Beautiful voice, right? I sent it to Danielle. She goes, "Oh my god, awful!" And it's like just because you can sing, some kind of belty rock song, doesn't always translate the other.
Qualified to just be able
because
to
it's a completely different way of singing. There's no straight. Well, okay, I don't want to say there's no straight tuning in opera. There are some more baroque kind of in modern music where you might want a straight tone, which is there's no vibrato.
Sure.
But the natural movement of the larynx is vibrato. Straight toning is actually not great for the instrument. It is used in opera occasionally for effect, but but again, this girl straight tones all the time because she's rock and roll like belting, and then she tries to sing opera with a vibrato, and her instrument just like falls apart because she doesn't know how to support this free flowing instrument. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
And I would love to meet her because give me an hour and I could have her doing it.
There is a heavy metal vocalist named Will Ramos who recently, within the last, let's say, 2 years, really got propelled into the forefront of like really insane screaming. And I'm talking about like the opposite end of the spectrum as far as what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And he got invited to a fellow YouTuber's audiologist, like specialist, and they did a whole YouTube video about his vocal cords. They numbed his throat. They put a camera down just so they can do his pig squeals and screams. And he is able to turn his muscles completely sideways.
Oh my God!
To get those vocal sounds.
Oh, that's horrifying.
And it's so cool to watch in real time. And he's been able to master those vocal progressions, and of him able to, let's say, reach really deep pig squeal, for example. And I'm using that as an example. He's able to get there instantly. And so his vocal cords, when you watch the video, they instantly go, and I'm using my hands to
I wouldn't even know how to do that.
Yeah, so go from two parallel lines going up and down into the sky, going sideways. So going from parallel to perpendicular. I think that's
yeah.
They just move instantly. It's so cool. I'll have to send it to
you.
you.
Yeah, please do, because singing is vocal manipulation. I mean, it's all about controlling your instrument, because when you sing, it actually tips. So like I could get in. I mean, gosh, we could be here all night telling you how your larynx works, and because it is important when you need to learn. It's not like we focus. We don't go to like pre-med classes or like ENT classes, but we learn enough about the anatomy so we know
what you're
when
doing.
We're on stage, and when we're performing, because like opera singing is an extreme ask of your voice. It's an extreme use of your larynx. Mm-hmm. Okay. Even though we can physically do it, and people have done it very successfully for a very long time, it's not really what it's like built to do all the time. I mean, listen, a violinist can practice 8 hours a day. Opera singers, hour and a half, and that's it. Mm-hmm. If you try to sing 8 hours a day, your voice is going to be gone.
But it's going
to be shot.
But in the mastery trajectory, if you will, on the journey to mastery, say that you can only do an hour and a half. Mm-hmm. It took you probably years to realize that.
Yes.
A, and B, let's make it easy numbers. Let's say it's an hour and a half that you can go as a max, that you can put your pressure on your vocal cords or your body.
At that operatic level.
Sure.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
And really any singing, to be honest. But
the mastery process is also knowing I need an hour and a half of warm up, or I need an hour before to have a cup of tea, or whatever it may be. I'm obviously oversimplifying something that has taken people years to master. So I'm kind of pulling out of my hat in the sense that I know, before I get on stage, I have certain things that I have to do behind the guitar. I have scales that I run quietly. There are stretches that I do for my hands, because you get older, and your body demands different things of you.
Oh yeah.
So it's also listening to yourself and not stopping and not kind of doing that.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's like, there's teachers that will say, before you sing, you got to do these breath exercises. I mean, obviously, before a show, I have to warm up. You can tell when a singer goes on cold. You can really tell.
I'm sure
their voice is just not really responding.
It's not lubricated.
Yes,
it's not ready.
You got to get the blood flowing in and around the larynx. So when you hit the stage, it's not the first note you've sung that day.
I'm not backstage running through scales as a joke.
No.
To look cool.
There's a lot,
I need my fingers warm. I need everything loosened.
The thing about opera and singing in general is that even though you might only be able to physically sing for an hour to an hour and a half a day, there's a lot of what we call armchair work. So I sing in German, French, Italian.
Oh, wow.
English, obviously. I tried Russian. There's some really great Russian operas, but that language is very difficult. And my teacher was like, There's enough Russian opera singers.
You're fine.
Let them sing it.
Let them do it.
Because there's not enough Russian opera. It's not like Italian opera.
Sure.
Where it's like, I mean, Italian opera's
everybody
right now, 24 hours a day. You know what I mean? There's Italian opera going on somewhere.
You can subscribe to that channel as well.
Yeah, exactly. But like, yeah, so let's say when I was cast as Tamino in The Magic Flute, I sang that in Italy in 2013.
Oh wow! In Italy?
Yeah.
How fantastic!
I get the score, and now the armchair work. I have to go through and highlight or whatever every time I sing.
Would you translate what you're singing so that you know which words are more important to you?
Oh, yes.
Wow.
So then I have to go through the score and translate the German into English, because when you open an opera score, if there's English under the foreign language, either French, Italian, or German, that English isn't necessarily what it says in the German or French or Italian, because what they do is they kind of do more of a poetic thing to make the words fit the notes. So a composer has the libretto. The libretto is all the lyrics, right? And they compose to the words, but the notes are to that foreign language. So when you try to make an English translation for the score, it doesn't always work. So they have to change it or tweak it. Sometimes they even have to add notes.
And you're saying this is when you're singing something that's written in...
Yeah, so The Magic Flute, written by Mozart in German. I get the score.
Or you're singing it in German? Or
in German.
Okay.
In German. The Magic Flute does get performed in English a lot, because it's kind of a princess, prince, sword. There's a dragon, kind of like a lot of times they do it as like a kid's opera.
Okay.
Even though The Magic Flute is one of my favorite operas of all time, but back in the day when it was written, it wasn't written for like the court. It was more like a musical.
Okay.
It was more like a funny kind of
theatrics,
farcical thing. And though now it's one of the most performed operas like of all time. So the last time I saw it was actually in English. But I sang it in German in Italy, so I have to translate it. And there are resources for this. It's been translated. I don't have to get a dictionary and do it myself.
Word for word
But so there are resources that will translate it word for word. Someone's already done this, and you pay to get that translation. If you really want to be into it, you can get a German dictionary and translate it yourself. But, time is time. You
may get it a couple weeks before.
Yeah. So I highlight, then I write all of that in. Then I write in something called IPA, the International Phonetic Alphabet.
Interesting.
It's an alphabet of sounds.
Sure.
So then I have to write in the IPA. So I know exactly how to pronounce all of these German words. Now
I did that with some of the people
yes.
that were in this book. Their names.
Yeah. So there's something called a transliteration. So like there's a Russian aria that starts with the word kuda, 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 right? Well, in Russian, it looks nothing like Kuda.
Sure.
I don't know, So they will write a transliteration Kuda for an English, so that's pronounced kuda. But the IPA is something completely...
It's like KOO.
It's a different deal. You know what I mean? So then I have to figure out the IPA for all the German words. Also, there are resources for that as well. Someone's done it, and you buy it.
I never thought about the correlation between the phonetic alphabet and how you would understand somebody else's translation.
I used to be able to write it like an IPA. I can write in it. I love IPA. It's actually something from my master's and just from my bachelor's as well. Just all my musical training that I really enjoyed IPA. I thought it was a really cool, this alphabet of sounds and symbols. Like there's no C in IPA. Like if it's cat, it's KAT. Because it's
almost like you wish English was written that way.
Yeah, it'd be a lot easier actually. And so then you have to do that. So but also you have to train in IPA. There's a mastery to that. Training in these languages, German, French, Italian. French is very difficult. And the idea of singing in French is not the same as speaking in French. So we don't necessarily take language classes to become fluent. We take classes that's focused on teaching a singer how to sing French.
Mm.
So that's the classes that I would take. So there'd be a woman or a man, and they would know the language, and I'd come in and sing a French song or a French aria, and they would help me with the French as per the singing. Not necessarily we're going to conjugate verbs.
Right. So
if that makes sense.
They're saying this word is pronounced this way. You would probably sing it like this.
Because the vowels still have to be pure.
Sure.
All vowels are like Italian vowels. Like if you master the Italian vowels. Now, obviously in French they have nasal vowels, but then you just put a nasal on it and you're good. Well, like it still needs to be pure singing, and it in the German, people say, oh, German is such this ugly guttural language, Well, I mean, it's gorgeous. I mean, German music is beautiful, and you have to love the consonants in German.
But
and
just
you can't shy away from them because it's part of the language, just like in English.
Yeah, but just having that resource of a teacher coming in and saying this is how you would pronounce this word in this foreign language.
Yes,
it's micro in compared to the macro.
Yes,
as far as the actual performance. Right?
Yes.
So you might have been taking that class 6, 7, 8, 10 times.
Yeah.
Just for 3 performances or 2 performances.
Oh yeah. But it informs your entire career, because French isn't changing, German isn't changing.
Mm-hmm.
Now here's the thing though. What'll happen is, like in the United States, we got Pittsburghese, we got a Kentucky Southern accent compared to a Texas Southern accent. You know what I mean? So what happens is, us American singers, you might do a performance in German, and maybe in Act 1 you sound more like you're from Dusseldorf, and in Act 2 you sound more like you're from Berlin. Now you wouldn't know that as an American, probably,
sure.
unless you're fluent in German or grew up in Germany. Yeah. But so the goal of an opera singer is to be able to land in Germany, sing in German, and convince them that you know what you're doing.
From the town that
your German is consistent. And obviously I would sing in a pure German,
Sure.
I don't know, you know what I mean, like a standardized German. I wouldn't aim to sing in a Dusseldorf accent or a Stuttgart accent,
that's
technically.
So cool.
Yeah, but see, I would want to sing in unless for some reason, like there's an American opera called Susanna, and it's from the South. So I used to sing an aria from it. It's in English. But you should have a Southern accent. Now, I'm not saying you go up there and sound like Reba McEntire. You know what I mean? But when you're pronouncing, it's about the way people is made, I reckon. That's the name of sound. It's about the way people is made, I reckon. Like, you can't sound like some guy doing voiceover,
Yeah.
It's about the way people is made, I reckon. You have to have that context, because the audience is listening to you, and if you don't have that little Southern accent and the way that you maybe pronounce some vowels here or there, it takes them out of the show.
But it goes hand in hand in preparation, just so that you can nail the pronunciation so you sound like a local.
Mm-hmm.
It goes hand in hand with saying, okay, so I'm performing in this section of the country of Italy or the country of Germany. I need to understand the dialect here.
Yeah.
So, like, my wife is from England. I've spent many years in England now because of her, and I'm getting a bit better at being able to pinpoint where an accent is from, because England has so many accents.
So many.
And I'm obviously lumping the entirety of the UK and some of the surrounding islands, if you will.
Oh, yeah.
Because you'll hear them and you'll see them in England.
I mean, there's a very distinct Welsh accent, obviously a very distinct Scottish accent.
Yep.
There's 2 really distinct Irish accents. Obviously, England itself has many, whether you're in London or you're
super posh, super south, or you make your way towards the north, where you become more and more common and more working class. I mean, working class, but you get what I'm saying.
I understand. Yeah, no, yeah, England has a lot of, actually, what's interesting is, so there's received pronunciation, which is the kind of BBC British news, how they speak.
Yeah.
Then there's standard American, which is the standard kind of English, which is kind of how I talk on the show.
Sure.
It's kind of radio voice, standard English that pretty much anyone...
It's not necessarily the transatlantic voice that they had
and then
back in...
it's called mid-Atlantic.
That's it. I'm sorry, not
So then I have to learn standard American, RP, which is British, and then Mid-Atlantic, which was a English dialect created, I believe, in World War I, so Americans and the British could understand each other because they were allies.
Right.
Now, a lot of people think Mid-Atlantic because we in the United States have the Mid-Atlantic states, which is Pennsylvania, like New Jersey. No, it's Mid-Atlantic as in this combination of American and British pronunciation.
England,
yeah. And that is usually used in what's called oratorio, which is like the Messiah, where it's this classical piece of music with a choir, with soloists, with orchestra, but you just stand on stage in tuxedos. There's no staging.
It's still used.
Oh, oratorio, yeah. I sing a lot of oratorio, yeah. The Messiah. Oh, my God. Every Christmas, you could trip over a Messiah's. Oh, my. And especially in New York, every little church has, every valley. Everyone's doing it. Oh, yeah. Oratorio is, actually, oratorio, in my opinion, usually isn't as, quote, hard as opera.
Yeah.
First off, you get to use your music. However, I have to say, by the end of all the rehearsals, you've pretty much had it memorized. But you have the music there because it's a very kind of broad piece of music with an orchestra, with a choir, with soloists, duets, quartets, all kind of different stuff going on. So actually having your score there is nice.
Right.
But yeah, oratorio is still a big, and then that should be typically sung with the Mid-Atlantic, not quite American, not quite British, this kind of in between. So if you want to talk about mastery in opera, it's a long road.
It's a long road, and it's multiple hours, which
yes,
I'm fine with. But.
And my biggest plateau in opera was the frustration over getting a solid high B flat.
Okay.
Which is very
specific note. Then.
Very, very important to have.
Would you say that some of the music that you chose specifically had that in it, or had it multiple times where you were hitting that key, or you needed to hit that specific key?
So basically, early on in my opera career, I had to avoid it because it was such an yes, it was not a secure note, and I did not want to go into auditions and splat. Basically, I would rather go and sing an aria that I had confidence in, that didn't have that for me at the time was a high note. Now it's attainable. Now it's the high B, which has become more attainable, and then my high C, which is the money note, the note that made Pavarotti famous, the note that every tenor wants. Mine is not really, but I developed in what's called a Helden tenor, or a Jungerliche Helden tenor, a kind of more Germanic, heroic voice, a little louder, a little bigger, a little heavier. Sometimes not necessarily baritonal in quality, but a little bit of a, not kind of a high tenor. So I don't really need a high C. Most of my rep doesn't call for it, but a high B. So I had this long plateau where a B flat just was not
happening.
And you have doubt that maybe I should go back to school. Maybe I should go be a doctor. I don't know. Maybe be a lawyer or something.
Mine was just before I switched careers, which is how I got to what we talked about earlier, how I got to that whole, imposter syndrome. And mine was, just like your C note.
Yeah.
Mine was certain functions in Excel. It was super nerdy.
Yeah.
I would stop my work. I would purposefully email it like 4:30, 4:35. I need a little bit more time because I can't figure this out. And I would just take my laptop home and Google it.
Sure. Yeah.
And I was doing it more and more and more, and I felt like a failure. So I gave up. And that's not, and I realize in hindsight, that's not the way to go.
Yeah.
I should have embraced the fact that I don't know and spend more time taking baby steps to get there. So you couldn't hit C. Yeah. So you specifically cherry-picked music to avoid it. And it's like...
Yeah, well, see, this is the issue is that when I agree to sing something, it happens in public, in front of people.
Right, okay.
And
so there is a weight to it.
And the thing about singing is you don't have one job where you go to the same building and you have health insurance or, and you get a, stipend for your car or something. You know what I mean? You are moving around. You're always auditioning. Like imagine if you had to interview for your job every 3 months.
Yikes.
Like think about that. Now I know there's progress or there might be like a review of your job. Like every so often you might, what do they call those? Like, where someone, looks over what you've been doing.
Performance review.
There it is. Performance review. Okay, so you definitely have those. But I lose my job every few months, and I have to go find another one.
Right.
So when I'm on stage performing, if I've picked a role that's way out of my league and I suck, well, you're only as good as your last show.
Okay. That's one.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whoever sees you on stage and you're not good because you've selected the wrong repertoire, that's the taste that you've left in their mouth.
Yeah.
And they could be a casting director. They could be a cellist. Who knows a casting director? They could be, a violinist in some orchestra who might go to their opera company that they work for and say, hey, I saw this guy, Mike. He was fantastic. Yeah. Why isn't he in like one of our shows?
You could also argue that you get to a certain point in your career where you might have a personal director or somebody that manages your schedule for you.
I did have a manager. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And unless your manager is ultra in tune with your capabilities,
yes,
meaning that they want you to over succeed what they initially thought you would get to. So somebody who's willing to take you beyond their imagination.
Yeah.
Unless you find somebody like that, they might inadvertently continuously give you the wrong music to perform, and you end up damaging yourself.
Yes.
And you think that you're doing something wrong because you've put all your faith in somebody that is selecting the wrong music. So somebody will give you C's only. Right?
Yeah.
Give you music that had that every single night. You're like, I can't.
Yeah.
I'm
so
not
like,
ready for that.
If so, my manager was an opera singer and he was a tenor and he did have a career and now he has a firm, like an agency. So he understands opera completely, understands, my voice, you know what I mean? And obviously never steered me wrong. But like, if he said, Mike, I got you La Fille de Regiment in France. Okay. The Daughters of the Regiment. That's what La Fille de Regiment means. Very famous opera. It has a tenor aria with 9 high C's. Okay. Unbelievably high. Like most arias have 1. It's the money note at the end. It's what you're really paid to do. That's
the climax.
Pavarotti that's what made his career. He went on stage. His 9 high C's were like nothing. And because when it was written, they were supposed to be like a yodels, kind of like a yodel. He held them. Ooh. No one ever heard that. I'm like, what? He just held it forever. You know what I mean? If my manager said, Michael, you're going to do La Fille de Regiment in France next summer, I'd be like, you're nuts. I would say no. Because at the end of the day, I understand you're like, because he talks about like this, like the edge, right, is one of the things where, this concept of knowing your physical capabilities, but trying to reach them as a way to kind of push yourself forward.
Yep.
Unfortunately, with singing, that could be dangerous.
Of course.
Like, physically.
It could be damaging, yeah.
It could be damaging. Not only to me physically, but to my career. Because if I go out there and splat all those high C's and just totally, just not even remotely be qualified to do it, it's just, I'll never get like hired again.
Right.
You just dig yourself into a hole because you're in front of an audience.
It happened. It happened.
There's critics, there's reviews, there's other opera singers, there's other directors, other managers. Someone, now we have these cell phones. It could be on TikTok. Listen to this guy like he can't sing. There's all, but also, even though if you have a manager and an agent and all these teachers, this is your instrument,
right?
And you have to guard it and know, I'm not ready for this.
It's something similar happened with some bands that are traveling from overseas into the United States, especially during COVID, and obviously very tumultuous time.
Yeah.
So we'll kind of preface that with that. And for a singer to take a day off from performing because they're not well, for the longest time was considered, in some of the music channels and forums that I follow, like, how could they do that? All you have to do is stand on stage and scream. Like, come on.
No.
There gets to a certain point in anybody's career, whether it's working in Excel or singing, where I'm not going to slum it for the sake of just doing another performance.
Yeah.
I need to take care of myself. I need to make sure that mentally, physically, emotionally, I'm here.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, speaking of singers, a lot like being an athlete. Our bodies are our instrument, and you
don't try to throw a 75-yard pass. You perfect 15, then 30, then 45.
You rarely hurt your voice when you're healthy. It's when you go and say, okay, I'm fine.
You get cocky.
I need to go perform. When you get obsessive and you get crazy and you know you're sick, you know you have a scratch in your throat and you sing anyway, that's usually when you hurt yourself. We're talking about like nodes, vocal hemorrhages, things of that nature, scary stuff. Oh, they teach you about this in school.
The stuff that you have to get surgeries for, and then you're out for months and months and months.
Vocal surgery is so scary, and it's scary because to sing, all you need, what you need to sing, to phonate. Phonate is anytime we're phonating right now. Anytime you make noise with your...
the reverberations that our mind understands as language.
When you phonate, you need the top layer of your chords only, right? So they're the most important. And when you get vocal surgery and stuff, one wrong move and that top layer gets damaged, you're done. So there used to be a lot of vocal surgery. Now they put you through a lot of vocal therapy first before. I mean, if you're a singer like me, if you're a professional singer where your voice is your livelihood, they're not just going to start cutting stuff right away. So if I had a node, right, a little bump, little, on the cord, little swelling, I would opt for months of vocal therapy before ever going under the knife. Yeah.
I think on the road to mastery, and that's why I loved this book, and I jumped at the chance of I know somebody that has a podcast. He talks about some really great topics, and that's why I pitched it to you, because the way this book, and it's like I said, it's 176 pages. It's small form factor, so it really, when you held it up earlier, I was like, oh yeah, I remember it is really small. The physical size of the book is very very small, and I read it in one day, and it resonated because I found all the failures that I did and all the different pressure points that I felt along the way getting to where I am now, written in a book that was written 31 years ago. Speak to me. It was written for me. And I'm hoping that other people can get the same kind of guidance that I got from that book.
I mean, guys, this is, I don't know if you want to call it a self-help book or...
Yeah, it's weird.
Or whatever you want to call it.
It doesn't quite fit into a self-help book because it's not, you can do it. It's not, and although
Actually, his message is, it's hard.
It is hard.
And you're going to spend a lot of time on these plateaus.
Yeah, and you're going to mess up a lot of times.
Yeah,
and that's the beauty of it.
And it's not going to be fun because all you want to do is become a scratch golfer or win that tennis match or shoot 25 straight. That took me months of failing at not getting 25, getting 24s.
Failing for different reasons each time. And not understanding why you're failing.
Yeah, and you know what? It wasn't easy. So there's 8 stations, right, where you move around like in a half circle. It's not like it was only station 3.
Right.
I can ace station 3 and then screw up 4 and then screw up 3 and then screw up 4. So in a way, it was like not always the same problem. And that's why it took and I had to ride these plateaus.
Of course.
And I had no idea it was a plateau. Like you know what I mean? Like if
I
would
you're holding the book as if it was an axe, it was a key.
Yes, it's like when I was reading this, I was thinking about these things that I've done. The plateau of not having a B flat, but keep going to lessons, keep practicing, keep being in shows, picking the proper rep that you're confident with. But while I might be singing the rep on stage that doesn't have the B flat, the rep that I have in my practice room only has B flats, all the arias, because I'm trying and trying. But you have to build the muscle, the structure around you have to.
Don't give up on the practice.
Yes, it's all about the practice.
You sometimes would perform poorly at station 1, then maybe at 3, and then 5.
Yes.
It could happen while you're holding the car keys on the way to practice, where you could have that realization: why am I even doing this?
Yeah.
And that's kind of like not the worst feeling, but that feeling hits on a level that is almost impossible to crawl out of unless you had the keys to understand this is a plateau, and the reason why it's happening is clearly laid out in that book. And that's why it was fascinating.
And there's also this thing of, okay, so for a right-handed shooter, station 2 is one of the most difficult.
Is this in all of them, or just in this particular one that you go to?
No, in all skeet games.
Okay.
Because they're all the same. I mean, it's a standardized sport. Like I said, the speed of the bird should be the same.
Got
it. The angle, how big the half circle is, how far away the high and low houses are. There's a standardization of it.
I didn't realize that.
So when you shoot these registered birds, as I talked about, and you shoot in competition, no matter where you go in Pennsylvania,
it is meant to be the same experience.
It's meant to be the same because it's all about consistency. Because if every skeet field's different, it's like every golf course is like different. Yeah, but that's more about your swing, not necessarily the course being different. In skeet shooting, you have to have a consistency of the skeet field. Okay, it's in a game called sporting clays, which is like golf with a shotgun. So sporting clays is where you have, I don't know, 20 different stations on like a path. You're actually in a golf cart. It has a rack for your shotgun, and you go to station, and you're just aimed out like into the woods, and the birds like come out of a tree, they come out up, there might be a rabbit going along the road. So that's a sport much more like golf, where there's inconsistency. Every time you go to Seven Springs to do sporting clays, it could be different.
Interesting.
Station 1 could be different from the last weekend, because that's the whole point of the game. If you said, Michael, I want you to teach me how to shoot a shotgun, we would not go sporting clays. We would not
start there.
No,
of course.
Sporting clays, in my opinion, is for someone who's already somewhat mastered skeet or trap or like 5-stand.
Sure.
They have control of the gun. They understand leads. They understand don't stop moving. They understand the fundamentals of the skill. And then sporting clays is when it's like, you know what? This is
really the next level.
Because when you stand at that station, you have to figure out how to shoot those birds right then and there. There's no like, oh, it's a 3-foot lead, a 4. You need to gauge it.
Yeah, because you're using muscle memory to the max.
All the skill, all the stuff that you've learned on a more controlled field like skeet or trap, you now have to take and think, okay, that is like a station 2 bird, and that's more like a trap bird. So I'm going to use the fundamentals of skeet for the first one and the fundamentals of trap for the second one. But if you don't have that
recall game,
if you don't have that foundation, you're going to have a miserable afternoon on a sporting clays field.
When I was talking about how I had issues with Excel and whatnot. What I did was eventually I got to a point where I specifically took initiative on asking for more troubles to troubleshoot, so more issues to fix within Excel, just so that I can expose myself to different, if you will, stations where the bird's coming at a different angle, or it's the platform that what's the machine that shoots it out? What's it called?
A trap machine.
Okay,
actually,
so a trap
it's
machine
called a trap machine.
6 inches higher than you're accustomed to. Maybe 13 feet away from you or something. Whatever it may be. But because you had experience somewhere else with doing something that was very similar, your body knows what to do. And it's why I feel very, very fortunate that there are times where people in my work right now will come and ask me for help with Excel, because I had to do all that backlog of figuring out stuff. Where I got to a point where I can, most of the time, without sounding arrogant, fix people's Excel issues. It doesn't get to, I don't get to that overnight.
It's interesting because in music, when you go to music school, it's school, right? It's just not you sing every class. Something called music theory. And music theory is
where does the note sit on the line? What does it look like?
Music theory is the math of music, let's say. It's how music is structured. In college, I was not very good at music theory. I was a jazz drummer and an opera singer. I rarely had to use, and even when I would go to jazz camps, during like the music theory classes, they would pull the drummers and we'd have drum theory classes. So when I read a jazz chart, have you ever seen a drumming jazz chart?
I went to percussion for 4 years.
Boom. There's X's and notes. Well, why is there a note? Well, that's actually that note is the snare drum. That note is the bass drum. That X is this symbol.
This is a flam.
Exactly. So you learn drum theory. So they're learning E minor diminished 7, and I'm learning how to use brushes on my snare drum. Like you know what I mean? So then as an opera singer, I'm not thinking about really where I am in the key. I just know my note is here. Now, as you get more advanced, you might just subconsciously know that I'm on the 5th, like of the chord,
Sure.
of the scale. But music theory was not one of my strong points. And when I got to my master's, and I was able to get through my bachelor's, but when I got to my master's degree, I'm at another level now. This is like pro.
This is serious now.
We're getting pro level. We're approaching that. And I got to the point where people were coming to me for help.
And it's almost like at times it happens organically.
Yes.
You didn't ask for it.
No.
And like, I guess people actually think that I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I'm still working my way through it.
I had to work like kind of, maybe twice as hard, maybe as others,
Sure.
just to.
Because you started later, or
No, it's just my music theory. You
didn't take it seriously at first. Then
let's put it this way. When I got to college, so when you audition for a music school, either before you get accepted or after you get accepted, you will take a theory exam so they can place you properly.
Mm-hmm.
So when I got to college, so when I applied to Duquesne, the theory exam was part of the audition process. But when I went to Lawrence University, they accepted me just based on my audition. And then we'll just teach you theory. So when I got there, like the first week of school, I took a theory exam. And I did so poorly, I was put in fundamentals theory, which we called fun fundamentals.
Yikes.
And
bit of an ego,
literally the first class was, all right, okay, so this is called a staff. And this little circle's a note, and then this is what a treble, this is the bass clef symbol, and I'm like, and I've been playing piano since I was 5. I know, and I'm like, oh my God, Mike, because
what have I done?
I just didn't in college. I just didn't focus on it enough.
Mm-hmm.
But then so I was in fun fundamentals. And I'm sorry, I didn't really focus it before college on it a lot. So when I got to college, I was in fun fundamentals. And then when I got to my master's, I forget what we did, if we did like a theory exam or what. I think everyone just kind of started like at the same level, like just musical, music theory. But there I was like, okay, I knew my experience in college. I sucked at it. Now we got to figure out how to be good at it.
Yeah, you actually have to take notes.
I was also older and more mature. There's also like a maturity level thing here. But, when people were asking, Mike, can you help me with my music theory? I'm thinking, I'm the last person.
Are you kidding me?
I'm the last person. But I guess in class, they see my effort, or I ask questions, or if he says, write this chord progression out on the board, I nail it because I've studied, because, I'm focusing on it.
It's almost like when you got to college, and I joke about this, and it's not joking because it's still serious. It's almost like you didn't have a 5-year plan.
Yeah.
And then when you got to college, you're like, okay, I really actually have to nail this in order for me to get to the 4.5 years later. When I hit 5, I know that this was important, so I'm using it now.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, you don't need a degree to sing opera. Okay, Pavarotti didn't have a master's degree in opera.
Sure.
But this is a different. See, my master's degree, it's like that piece of paper is great to have on my wall here. But getting that degree was much more about, if I didn't go to the Manhattan School of Music for my master's, I would have never sung in Italy. I would have never sung in San Francisco. I would have never had my manager. Now, maybe I would have taken a different path.
Sure.
But there's all these things that happened in my life and career that were a result of going there, meeting these people. You know what I mean? Like
understanding those steps brought you to that.
Yes. Like my teacher who taught the English IPA courses, like I was talking about, reserved pronunciation or received pronunciation, all that. She literally wrote the book on this.
Oh wow!
Like it's literally her textbook.
That's so funny because
she's the authority.
My drum teacher was Roger Humphreys.
Same.
So
not a joke.
So
I met Roger at the Duquesne Jazz Camp.
Yeah, he was my high school teacher for 3.5 years.
Yeah, and I went up to him. And I was like in awe of this guy.
Yeah, he's great.
For those who don't know, Roger Humphreys is a local Pittsburgh jazz legend.
If you open up any textbook about jazz where drummers are featured, there is an incredibly strong likelihood that Roger Humphreys will be there. And to have access to somebody like that at the age of 13 and a half, 14.
Yeah, unbelievable.
It's so awesome.
Talk about mastery. Talk about
this is somebody who sat behind the drum set and just oozed confidence.
Yes.
And was so stylish.
Yeah.
Not necessarily just with his playing, just with his emotions.
Yeah.
Anyways, so
well, I
like she wrote the book.
Yes.
This guy was in the book.
Yes. I approached him and said, "Excuse me, Mr. Humphreys, I'm looking for." So I was really at that point just learning how to play jazz by ear. When I got to high school, I was in concert band, smashing the cymbals together, playing the snare.
You were proper percussion.
Exactly. And I don't know what in me, how I played the snare or hit the cymbals together made the band director ask me if I knew how to play jazz. Something. He saw something in me. I said, "No, I've never played jazz."
Jazz hands. That's
Maybe. He goes, "Well, come to my office after school." So I go to his office. He goes, "Here's a Buddy Rich CD. Here's a Max Roach. Yeah, Max Roach CD, Art Blakey, all the great jazz rappers. Go and listen to them. And we have a jazz band and a jazz combo. I think this is something that you could do." So I was playing by ear at that point. But I really wanted to the jazz camp is fine, but it's only a couple weeks like in the summer. I really wanted to learn how to play jazz. Just like, how do you do the job, And I said, "Mr. Humphreys, I'd like to, find a teacher. Do you have any recommendations?" He goes, "Well, take down my number and I can teach you." And I was like, "Really?" I mean, I was like, I'm not worthy. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't expect that. I didn't expect that at all. Swing. And anyway, it's a Wayne's World Wayne's World reference.
Don't copyright. No copyright strikes. I promise. It's so
cool guy.
He's incredible.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's still actively teaching. I've been so far removed.
Yeah, same. I have no idea.
But definitely feel very fortunate to have had that backing, that schooling from him.
That was a great jazz camp, by the way, Duquesne, back in the day.
Camp sounds like a really good time then.
Yeah, it was. You're playing with a lot of different people, meeting a lot of different people, meeting great players who are now older, like who used to play with trumpet player, super famous.
Oh my gosh.
Armstrong?
Armstrong, no?
No, not Louis. More contemporary than Louis Armstrong. Miles Davis. Okay, so anyway,
jazz car revoked.
Yes,
seriously.
literally, I have to send it back in.
That's it.
So Miles Davis. So there was a teacher at this jazz camp who used to play with Miles Davis. He was also a trumpet player, and he called Doc Williams, I believe, or Doc Wilson, maybe something like that. And you hear the stories, and I'm again in high school, and it's unbelievable that these guys are not that far removed from an Art Blakey or a Miles Davis, or
they're in the same career boat.
It's unbelievable. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what's cool, I guess, if you will, you get to a certain point in your own life, in your own kind of maturity, where you realize they're still on the mastery trajectory.
Oh, yes.
But they're teaching their ways.
Yes.
And they're still perfecting. So every time they show you, okay, this is how you do a flam stroke or a paradiddle, and you got to hold your sticks like this, and every time it balances, you got to feel the weight of this, whatever it may be, however they want to teach it. That still is part of that mastery trajectory, because they're still bestowing all that information on you. So in that process, they're becoming even bigger of a master.
Oh, yeah. So I had a couple students when I was in New York.
You got to make money.
Well, yeah. And I realized that I had to explain to them how to sing.
Okay.
Well, I know how to sing, but I've been singing since I was 7 years old. There are things that I do, I don't even know how I do them.
They just happen.
It just happens. Okay. So now I have to figure out how to explain to them what's happening in my throat, what's happening with my soft palate, what's happening with resonance, like we talked about, like into the mask. Where am I breathing? You don't breathe into your chest. You breathe into your stomach and into your lower back. How my legs are, how I'm standing. These are all these things that I don't necessarily think about much anymore. And it makes me a better singer, because it makes me aware. Kona is trying to make out with the Dean right now. And
I stopped scratching her.
Yeah, yep. And now she wants back in,
and she's crawling into my lap.
Yes. So, So even though, like George Leonard says, mastery is a lifelong process. However, I like he was talking about when he, was doing Aikido, he never thought he would be a black belt. But then and then he ended up being a 5th degree black belt. So it's like there's just this, and then he had his own dojo, and it's like you realize after all this practice, all this time spent, that you get to a point where you do have a certain level of ability that can be passed down to someone who's more early on their path to mastery.
I guess you could call it almost a responsibility.
Yeah,
because
sure.
if you gave up on opera altogether,
yeah,
you literally not necessarily throw away all that time and all of those plateaus and all those internal monologues you have with yourself thrown out the window. And you could say, for lack of better words, that it's giving up. But maybe not necessarily opera singing is going to be the next trajectory or the next mastery course, but maybe singing and teaching to sing in different languages will be your forte. Just throwing something into the wind here. So I guess part of this revelation that I had with this book is that it's not that there's only right answers. There's just answers all over the map. It's just a matter of finding the ones that resonate with you. And part of the plateau or part of the mastery is learning about those plateaus, which is why I'm glad that it resonated with you too. About opera, and I'm like, I get it. And when I was in New York and I was feeling this, it was like that.
Yes. Oh yeah. And the thing about I might try to hit a. So again, when you are your instrument, how your mouth is shaped can literally help you hit a note or not or something.
For sure.
And I might try to sing that B flat with one kind of jaw position and mouth opening, and then I'm going to try a different one, or maybe I watch Pavarotti hit a B flat. All right, well that's what his face looks like.
Yeah.
Maybe if I mimic that.
Or you practice in the mirror without noise.
There's all kind of like try to raise my cheeks or squint my eye. Yeah. Listen, this all sounds bizarre, but when you watch a master, like so maestro, you know how they're called maestro? That's just Italian for a master. So Maestro Pavarotti, you're calling him Master Pavarotti. He's mastered. Like the moment that someone says maestro to you, you know that you've hit a level. I mean, that if everyone had said Maestro Papinchek, I'd cry. You know what I mean? That'd be like amazing, right? Like in an opera context.
I'm gonna get you a mug.
Yeah, this is my.
That's coming in the mail.
But that just means that you might not know it, but other people are perceiving you that way. So I might say, okay, I'm struggling with this B flat. Maybe it's with my articulators. Maybe there's an issue with my physical, how I'm physically trying to do it. So you might mimic Pavarotti. And again, you don't know what his larynx is doing, but because you're not inside, but you can see his face and, he has a certain look. Okay, about Jonas Kaufmann, another famous tenor. Well, he does his B flat this way.
Or maybe he takes his breath
maybe
at a certain point before and he's actually not hitting it a certain way.
Jazz drummers, talk about, and Roger Humphreys talked about, he would listen to this Max Roach record, right? And he could never figure out a certain fill. How was Max doing that? It wasn't until he saw Max Roach in concert just play that song and do that fill. He saw how he moved his hands. And
then he got it.
Listening jazz is all about listening. But sometimes it only goes so far. You got to watch the person do it.
My favorite thing about Roger Humphreys when he was teaching us, and this is like totally a throwback, but my favorite thing is it's the first drummer that taught me with using his mouth. Just hit it like, like, wait, just sing what I'm singing, but then do it with your hands.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
What?
That's incredible.
And he would teach like that at times.
Yeah.
I was like, no, just listen to it. And he would clap his hands.
Yeah.
And I was like, and he would make everybody in the room clap their hands on beat. And wait, okay, this sounds childish.
But no, because I guess
it's that muscle memory.
It's in your head, we've talked about, in the book, it's this idea of like intentionality, visualizing, and let's say golf, because he mentions golf. I think Jack Nicklaus, he was so successful because he visualized the stroke. He visualized how
ball
the ball is
going.
going to go, visualized how it's going to land. Before he even approached the ball or did a practice swing, all this is being visualized. So it's like, let's say the soprano is singing. I got a big high note coming. I've sung that high note in my head 100 times. While she's singing, I'm obviously still engaged as a performer. I'm not like zoned out. But in my mind, I'm inside singing that note, kind of like I'm preparing my instrument to do it.
It's almost like your brain is mimicking her words because you're leading yourself up,
Yes.
and you're almost like it's almost like you're in the process of putting your shoes on so that you can plant them on the floor when your cue is up.
Yes, and the great thing about doing a full opera is a lot of times the emotion, kind of the character, because singing doesn't always have to be perfect. Okay, like sometimes I'm not talking about you crack a note or you sing flat, but you should always sing well, and like obviously, and my teacher's like, it has to sound sexy no matter like what you sing. It has to sound good.
Right.
But when I was doing Carmen, and Carmen and Don Jose fight at the end of the opera, and Don Jose kills Carmen, stabs her, and kills her. Okay, that's a pretty emotional, wild, dramatic thing. So, when I'm angry, because obviously I didn't kill her happily, I was very angry.
Oh, you didn't enjoy it then?
Yeah, sometimes if a note is kind of a little weird, but if it's an anger moment, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying it's weird as I'm producing it poor, like I'm not phonating properly, but just how you perceive it as an audience. Well, that note wasn't as pretty, but it's because he's about to kill her. He's like really. So there are times like that in opera where the emotion really
it's almost like
it propels,
it overshadows everything else,
and
because it's more important.
Yes, it propels the voice, and just like in acting, when you're acting and someone and you're reacting to what they're saying, if they're yelling at you and you're like have a totally different affect, the scene isn't jiving, right? Not to say you have to have a screaming match, but I'm just saying, like, if you're not responding to what they're giving to you, opera's the same way.
Yeah.
It's a little different because we're singing and there's music, but like, and
I feel like the acting is also, because you're singing.
Yeah.
It's not as dancey. It's not as flashy. It's a lot more romantic.
Yeah. Opera's broad because literally at the end of the opera Werther, he like shoots himself and then sings like a half-hour duet. Okay, well, in real life, he'd be dead. But it's opera. You know what I mean?
This isn't real life.
This isn't real life. So, everything in opera is kind of stretched out because singing is a stretched out form of speaking, and you could literally be dying, but you sing a half-hour, duet or something. I mean, I'm not saying a half-hour,
But you would never get to this level of understanding every facet of opera without having spent those countless hours doing the most mundane of stuff, like learning the language, understanding, okay, in this particular opera, somebody's going to be killed, and I'm the one killing.
Yes.
So I need to understand why it's happening, why the contention's happening, and I need to know every possible aspect about the show, including the costumes, who I am, what my profession is, whatever.
Yeah, so Carmen is based on a novella.
Okay.
So I don't know if I read it, but that could be part of your trying to master that role. You might read the book, because a lot of times operas are based on books, and then someone writes a libretto, and then it it becomes an opera. Like you know what I mean? So gosh, she's such a goofball, isn't she?
Yeah, what you can't see
is
while we're talking, she keeps readjusting herself so that my hand scratches a different part of her body.
Yes. Oh, yeah. She has no shame at all.
She is an attention-seeking dog, and so is my dog.
Yes.
It's okay.
Yeah.
She is in good company.
Oh, yeah. So like, there's, I mean, I don't think a lot of people like read the book La Boheme, but it is good to at least read the Wikipedia article. I don't know. Look up the Carmen novella. Who wrote it? When was it written? How is it different from the opera? Like, I definitely did something because I knew a background of my character, Don Jose, that I believe in the novel he actually killed someone in his village escaped to the Spanish army and then met Carmen as a prostitute in Seville, Spain. So him killing her at the end is a surprise to you because you don't know that. So I guess Bizet just kind of left that out because it would kind of not ruin the ending, but he already killed.
It's supposed to be a shock.
Yeah, he already killed someone else. So him killing Carmen's not that big of a deal. So if like the show opened with me killing someone and then going into the army, and then Carmen's death isn't that big of a thing. So for dramatic purposes, that's left out. But even though I don't ever express it in the show, I know as a character that I've done it before. I've already killed someone.
You've got all the skills needed to perform again.
Yes, I'm in the army to escape prosecution or whatever it would have been back then, to escape being hung in the town square. I'm hiding away in the Spanish army. It's a French opera, but it takes place in Spain.
Sure.
And then becoming, Don Jose doesn't just fall in love with Carmen. He becomes infatuated. And he goes to jail for her. There's this whole story. And when he gets out of jail, she's moved on to someone. She's a prostitute. See, my teacher said the show really should be called Don Jose because Carmen stays the same. She never changes. Okay. She's the same character throughout. She uses people. She's a prostitute. She's kind of on the lower level of things. Don Jose in the opera goes from some guy in the military to going to jail for a woman and then killing her. Right. He has the real character
very interesting arc. Yeah.
He has the arc. And but you need to have all of that.
Yeah.
You have to have all that inside of you.
Otherwise,
it's just a flat performance.
I was just going to say, it is just another performance.
Yeah.
Versus this is. I wish in English there was the word between a performance and a performance.
Yes.
Like we just don't have the language for that.
Yeah.
But you get it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And people. And it translates to the audience. An audience member will know that person is performing at a level where they've done their homework.
Or they meet you after the show and they go, I'm sorry, I can't speak your language, I'm American. And you're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
That's how you know. Like those are very small, but very palatable indicators of true mastery.
Yeah.
And they bubble up to the surface at weird times, but unless you have these keys and that this book talks about, unless you understood it at a very microscopic level and how they intertwine and embed themselves in your life, you would never be able to never be able to have that insight. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, and it's another thing I wanted to mention about the book, something that I really like is this. He talks about gaining energy from unexpected blows. This is towards like the end. And something that I thought of is a long time ago, I heard this story that when Thomas Edison was 67, his factories like burnt down.
Okay. I don't know this story, so this is new to me.
So this is the whole idea is, let's say I had a performance, right? Actually, this did happen to me. I sang for a panel of people from 4 different opera companies, and they just shit all over me.
Was this part of like an audition?
This was part of a program that I was in as I was coming up. And they were just like, I left there thinking I'm never singing ever again, like in my life. So Thomas Edison, right? His factories are literally burning down. Instead of like being woe is me, like my life is over. Now he's 67. So, I mean, he's already lived, he says, go get your mother and all her friends. They'll never see a fire like this again.
Wow.
It was this, you'll never see this kind of fire again. And he told the New York Times, although I'm 67 years old, I'll start over again tomorrow. And then it leads into a book called The Obstacle is the Way, the timeless art of turning trials into triumph.
Yeah.
The obstacle is the way. That
so cool.
It's almost like, wow, my factory's burnt down. I get to rebuild them. I get to rebuild them better.
Yeah, there you go. But
right?
but not
You know?
not having that support
Yeah.
of knowing, okay, so it burning down literally your entire life's work,
Yes.
what you became probably famous for, because
Yeah.
with Thomas Edison
Yeah.
being inventor of multiple different patents,
Exactly.
your entire life's work.
He could have been depressed. He could have gone into alcoholism. No.
What do
We
you
get-
remember what years this is? What?
Oh
when
boy,
was this?
I don't even know.
So let's just say
Yeah.
this is in the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
Right? Buildings don't just prop up.
Oh yeah,
It
yeah,
takes
yeah.
many years and many
Yeah.
manpower, because back then, sure, they had machinery, but to build a factory wasn't
Yeah,
a month.
exactly.
So for him to have the insight and kind of the wealth of knowledge to just say, I'll just build it back better tomorrow.
Yeah, it's like, I didn't fail 10,000 times. I just found 10,000 ways not to make a light bulb. It's that kind of mentality that, you have to have when it comes to an Edison or a Musk or a Bezos or a Gates or a Steve Jobs.
Mm-hmm.
It's just this, like, no matter what, it, 2 steps back could propel me all the way forward. It's tough because it takes a mental resilience
that is out of control.
Yeah, I don't know if many people. Well, first off, many people I probably don't, because if a lot of people did, we'd have a lot of Elon Musks out there. Yeah, you know what I mean.
Of course.
But like, it takes a special kind of person, to. But what I'm trying to say is, in your life, you don't necessarily have to be a Thomas Edison or a Musk to understand the principle that obstacles are there. Is the way. I think that's such an interesting title for this book. That was referenced. The obstacle is the way.
Speaking of Edison, somebody that's, like you say about Elon Musk, and this is just a little tidbit. There's a YouTuber called Marquez Brownlee. He goes by MKBHD. He does tech reviews. He interviewed Elon Musk in his factory.
Yeah.
So a YouTuber interviewing a CEO, well-renowned billionaire.
Yeah.
And he said the most fascinating thing about him is when he did the tour before their discussion, and Elon was able to go to every machine and know exactly what it does, how it works, what part of the chain it belongs to.
Yes.
And sure, I'm sure there are a lot of people, just like he said in this interview, I'm sure there are a lot of people that work at his level that know every piece of machinery, but it's not common.
Yeah. Well. I mean, hey, he could listen.
He's a big nerd. He's a big.
He could
nerd.
easily say, I'm going to hire these 10 engineers, build me a rocket.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to hire these 10 guys, go build me electric cars, and my name's going to be on it. But I don't care how you make them, just make them. No, he's involved.
He's part of the drawing process from the start, which is so cool.
He like sleeps in his office or something. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he doesn't even have a house.
He's pretty mental.
Yeah, he doesn't have a house or something. I mean, it's like unbelievable. The guy's unbelievable, and he's unstoppable. Like, there's just nothing can like
I'm a Elon fanboy at heart.
Yeah, I'm not like super involved in like any of that space kind of stuff, but like usually when Elon gives interviews and stuff, I kind of feel like, wow, he really is someone who is on his path, and there's nothing that could get him off of it. You know what I mean? He has a kind of a one-track mind kind of thing.
The most poetic part about Elon Musk is he said, listen, I'm going to build a commercial company that's going to take humans, Joe Schmoes, into space. Watch me.
Yeah.
And he did it.
That's unbelievable.
I think it was during the pandemic, or maybe just before the pandemic. They had the first commercial flight that took people to space, and he had volunteers from different parts of the United States. One was somebody that worked at like St. Jude's Hospital.
Mm-hmm.
They did a whole Netflix specials about
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, it's really cool. I think it's like Journey to Space or something like that. I can't remember, but it's great. I'll find out the title of it.
Yeah. Well, man, this has been a great discussion.
Yeah. Thank you.
And for those out there that are interested, I got the book, I believe, off Amazon, like pretty much everything else in my life.
I went to the library like a nerd.
Yeah. And it is called Mastery: The Keys to Success and Long-Term Fulfillment by George Leonard. Go pick it up. Even though it was written in 1991.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was published in 91 and had many edits to it.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's still very,
It's still very relevant.
Yeah.
And thank you for giving me the time to talk about it. I really appreciate the invitation
and
the hospitality. This was such a very insightful conversation. I never in a million years knew that you took opera to the level that you told
yes,
me. Which is amazing.
Yeah, it was a short career. I mean,
it doesn't matter how long it was.
No, it was a short career. A lot of, as you kind of alluded to at the beginning of the show, some family stuff. Then the pandemic hit.
Things
so
happen.
there are things that happen in life that might take you off a certain path, but put you on a different one. Yeah, I was. I kind of tell people I like Forrest Gumped my way like through opera. I kind of fell ass backwards into it. It wasn't something that I was seeking.
Sure.
It sought me out, but
it found you.
It found me, and I just kind of, was on that path, and
you allowed it to consume you.
Yeah.
But you were happy with it consuming you because you found something in it.
A lot of joy and a lot of cool experiences.
Yeah. And it may not be the right thing for you now, but version of it.
A version, yes. I would love to teach, but that that's a whole nother podcast. So
for the next time.
Yes, for the next time. So, Dean, thank you so much for coming.
Again.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Michael Papinchak Show. Please go to tmpspodcast.com, where you'll find links to iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. Please like, share, and subscribe.